A unique love story turned sour. Secrets of a wealthy affair. Prologue: The shattered reflection. The rain lashed against the panoramic windows of my penthouse, mirroring the tempest raging inside me. The city lights, once a source of comfort and inspiration, now seemed like mocking glares, each one a reminder of my shattered illusions. I raised a trembling hand to my reflection in the glass, a ghost of the woman I once was staring back. Anna Sterling, or rather Anna Caldwell, wife of the illustrious Jack Caldwell, heir to a fortune and a name that echoed through the halls of high society. That name, once a badge of honor, now tasted like ash in my mouth. The fairy tale had crumbled, leaving behind a wasteland of deceit, betrayal, and a burning desire for retribution. I closed my eyes, the scent of rain mixing with the faint, lingering aroma of his cologne. A fragrance that had once stirred my heart, now ignited a cold fury. He was gone behind bars, his empire reduced to rubble. Vivian, his accomplice, his mistress, was facing her own reckoning. But even with them incarcerated, the feeling of unease persisted, a gnawing suspicion that the final chapter of this twisted saga had yet to be written. The anonymous text message still burned in my memory. "You think this is over? Was it over? Or was this merely the eye of the storm?" I opened my eyes, my gaze hardening. I wouldn't cower. I wouldn't be a victim. I would face whatever darkness lay ahead, armed with the knowledge I had gained and the strength I had discovered within myself. But to understand where I was, I had to go back to the beginning, to the moment when the fairy tale began, to the seeds of deceit that were sown long before I ever suspected anything was amiss. Part 1: The Gilded Cage. Chapter 1: The Waltz of Enchantment. I never imagined that my seemingly perfect marriage would one day turn into a nightmare of deception and betrayal. My name is Anna, and for the past 8 years, I have been married to Jack, a man who, by all accounts, appeared to be the embodiment of a devoted husband. Wealthy, charming, and charismatic, Jack swept me off my feet in a whirlwind romance that seemed too good to be true. Turns out it was. The irony was that I wasn't looking for a fairy tale. I was content with my life. My small art gallery in Soho, my quiet evenings spent painting. I was fiercely independent, a survivor who had clawed her way up from humble beginnings. My parents, both artists, had instilled in me a love for beauty and a resilience that had been tested time and again. They had died when I was in my early 20s, leaving me with a small inheritance and a burning desire to make them proud. Then Jack Caldwell entered my life. Our love story was the kind people envied. Jack came from old money, his family name carrying weight in high society. He was everything I had ever dreamed of: attentive, caring, and fiercely protective. We met at a charity gala, where he waltzed into my life with an air of effortless confidence. I remember the moment vividly. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and champagne. I was standing near a window, feeling slightly out of place amidst the sea of perfectly coiffed heads and designer gowns. I was wearing a simple, elegant dress that I had designed myself, feeling a little like an imposter in this world of privilege. Then he appeared, a beacon of light in the opulent room. His smile was dazzling, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he approached me. "Excuse me," he said, his voice a smooth baritone that sent a shiver down my spine. "I couldn't help but notice you. You look like you're about to escape." I laughed, surprised by his directness. "And what if I am? Then I would have to offer my assistance," he replied, extending his hand. "Jack Caldwell. And you are?" "Anna Sterling," I said, taking his hand. His touch was warm and firm, sending another unexpected jolt through me. He didn't let go of my hand immediately. He held my gaze, his eyes searching mine. A beautiful name for a beautiful woman. I blushed, unused to such blatant flattery, but there was something genuine in his eyes, something that made me believe him. He led me onto the dance floor, and for the rest of the evening it felt like we were the only two people in the room. He was charming, witty, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. He asked about my art, my passions, my dreams. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine. I was captivated, and before I knew it, we were engaged. A year later, we stood in a grand cathedral exchanging vows, promising forever. Chapter 2: A Fairy Tale Woven with Gold. Our wedding was nothing short of a fairy tale. Hundreds of guests, lavish floral arrangements, and an orchestra playing as I walked down the aisle. Jack's eyes never left mine, filled with a promise of devotion. In that moment, I believed I had found my happily ever after. I remember the weight of the dress, the feel of the silk against my skin, the flash of the cameras. But most of all, I remember the look in Jack's eyes as I reached the altar. It was a look of pure adoration, a look that made me believe that I was the most important person in the world to him. The reception was a blur of champagne, music, and well wishes. Jack was the perfect host, charming and attentive to everyone. But he always made sure to keep me close, his hand resting possessively on my waist. Later that night, as we drove away in a vintage Rolls-Royce, I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling a sense of contentment I had never known before. "We did it," I whispered. "We did," he replied, squeezing my hand. "And this is just the beginning." For a long time I believed we were happy. Jack provided me with a lavish lifestyle. Weekend getaways in the Hamptons, designer clothes, private chefs. But beyond the extravagant gifts, he was also a man who made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. He supported my art, encouraging me to pursue my passion. He bought several of my paintings, displaying them prominently in our home. He even helped me expand my gallery, providing the financial backing I needed to take it to the next level. We traveled the world together, exploring exotic locations, and creating memories that I thought would last a lifetime. We laughed, we danced, we made love. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. But even in those early years, there were subtle signs, whispers of doubt that I chose to ignore. The late-night phone calls he took in the hallway, his hushed conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room, the occasional business trips that seemed to stretch on longer than necessary. I dismissed them as paranoia, insecurities that stemmed from my own past. I told myself that I was lucky to have him, that I should trust him completely. Chapter 3. The Shadow of Doubt. The first crack in the facade appeared during a trip to the Caldwell family estate in Newport, Rhode Island. It was a sprawling mansion overlooking the ocean, a relic of a bygone era. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow me as I walked through the halls. Jack's family was complicated. His father, a powerful and ruthless businessman, was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. His mother, a socialite with a penchant for gossip and designer handbags, seemed to barely tolerate my presence. But it was Jack's cousin Serena, who truly unsettled me. She was beautiful, elegant, and possessed a sharp wit that could cut like a knife. She had known Jack since childhood, and there was a familiarity between them that made me uneasy. One afternoon, I overheard Serena and Jack talking in the garden. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their voices carried on the breeze. "You seem different, Jack," Serena said, her voice laced with a hint of sarcasm. "Settled down. Almost domesticated. Is that a bad thing?" Jack replied, his tone defensive. "For you? Perhaps." Serena said, "You were always meant for bigger things, Jack. You were never meant to be tied down to a gallery owner from Soho." I felt a pang of insecurity, a familiar feeling from my past. Was I not good enough for him? Was I holding him back? I turned to walk away, but then I heard Jack's response. "Anna makes me happy, Serena," he said. "She's everything I've ever wanted." I stopped, my heart swelling with relief. I wanted to believe him, but Serena's words had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Later that evening, as Jack and I sat on the terrace watching the sunset, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. "Is everything okay?" Jack asked, sensing my unease. "Yes, Elite. Everything's perfect." He smiled, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. Chapter 4. The Unfamiliar Earring. Started with small things. Late-night meetings that became more frequent. A change in his cologne. A sudden interest in staying fit. I dismissed my doubts, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. After all, Jack was a busy man. But then, I found the first clue. An unfamiliar earring under the passenger seat of his car. A delicate gold hoop, nothing extravagant, but certainly not mine. I remember the day vividly. I had offered to take Jack's car in for an oil change, wanting to do something nice for him. As I was cleaning out the car, I reached under the seat and my fingers brushed against something small and metallic. I pulled it out and my heart skipped a beat. It was a delicate gold hoop earring intricately designed. I knew instantly that it wasn't mine. I only wore studs. My heart pounded as I held it in my palm, my mind racing through possible explanations. Maybe it belonged to a coworker? Maybe it was his sister's? But deep down I knew better. That night, as Jack lay beside me, his arm draped lazily over my waist, I stared at the ceiling, my mind running wild. Was I imagining things? Was I willing to destroy my own peace for suspicions I couldn't prove? I resolved to let it go until I found more. Lipstick smudges on his shirts, perfume that wasn't mine lingering on his suits, hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The evidence began to mount, each clue chipping away at my trust, eroding the foundation of our marriage. I started to feel like I was living in a movie, a bad one where the protagonist is the last to know about her husband's infidelity. I became obsessed with finding out the truth, spending hours analyzing his behavior, scrutinizing his every move. I started to lose sleep, my anxiety levels skyrocketing. I lost my appetite, and my clothes started to hang loosely on my frame. I was becoming a shadow of my former self, consumed by suspicion and doubt. Chapter 5: Echoes of the Past. My growing unease was compounded by resurfacing memories from my childhood. My father, a talented but emotionally volatile artist, had struggled with infidelity throughout their marriage. My mother, a strong and independent woman, had endured years of heartbreak and humiliation before finally divorcing him. The scars of that experience ran deep, shaping my perceptions of love and trust. I had always vowed never to repeat my mother's mistakes, never to allow myself to be taken advantage of. The memory of my mother's pain, her silent tears and forced smiles haunted me. I remembered the day she finally told me she was leaving my father. I was only 12, but I understood the gravity of the situation. "Sometimes, Anna," she had said, her voice trembling, "love isn't enough. You have to respect yourself enough to walk away from something that's hurting you." Those words resonated with me now, as I struggled to reconcile my love for Jack with the growing evidence of his betrayal. Was I being naive? Was I blinded by love? Was I destined to repeat my mother's tragic story? The idea of confronting Jack terrified me. I didn't want to believe he was capable of such deceit. I didn't want to shatter the illusion of our perfect life. But I also knew that I couldn't live with the uncertainty, the constant gnawing doubt that was consuming me. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Part 2. The Unraveling. Chapter 6. The Chicago Deception. One night, Jack returned home late, far later than usual. He was visibly nervous, avoiding my gaze as he undressed. My heart pounded. I decided to test him. "How was Chicago?" I asked casually. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "Good. Just the usual meetings," he said, forcing a smile. I nodded, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. His lie hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. The next morning, I made a bold move. I found his suitcase and rummaged through it. Everything seemed normal, until I found a receipt. A 5-star restaurant in New York, 2 entrees, and an expensive bottle of wine. The date? The exact night he was supposed to be in Chicago. My fingers clenched around the paper. It was no longer paranoia. It was proof. The lie was blatant, a slap in the face. He had lied to me, looked me in the eye and lied. I felt a surge of anger, a raw, primal rage that I had never experienced before. How could he do this to me? How could he betray our vows, our love? I wanted to scream, to yell, to confront him with the evidence. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. He would just deny it, concoct another elaborate lie to cover his tracks. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to gather more evidence, to build an airtight case against him. I needed to plan my next move carefully, to ensure that he couldn't wriggle out of the consequences of his actions. I carefully placed the receipt back in his suitcase, smoothing out the wrinkles. I wouldn't let him know that I knew. Not yet. Chapter 7. The Private Investigator. The real confirmation came 2 weeks later. Jack had a business trip again. But this time, I didn't sit idly by. I hired a private investigator. I found her through a discreet contact, a lawyer friend who specialized in divorce cases. Her name was Sarah, and she had a reputation for being thorough, discreet, and ruthless. I met her at a small, dimly lit bar in the Lower East Side. She was a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a steely demeanor. I explained my suspicions, laying out the evidence I had gathered. Sarah listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I was finished, she nodded slowly. "I can help you," she said. "But it won't be cheap, and it might not be what you want to hear." "I need to know the truth," I said, my voice firm. "No matter what it is." Sarah gave me a grim smile. "All right, I'll get to work." The next few days were agonizing. I waited anxiously for Sarah's report, my mind racing with possibilities. I tried to distract myself with my work, but it was impossible. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus on anything but the looming uncertainty. Then one evening Sarah called. "I have something for you," she said, her voice grave. "Can you meet me at the same bar?" My heart sank. I knew instinctively that the news wasn't good. Chapter 8. The Vivian Revelation. The results shattered my world. Jack wasn't in Chicago. He was in New York. More specifically, he was holed up in a luxury hotel suite with a woman named Vivian, a young, stunning socialite who worked in PR. The pictures were undeniable. Jack holding her hand as they walked into a high-end restaurant. Jack, his lips dangerously close to her ear as they shared an intimate dinner. Jack leading her into his hotel suite in the middle of the night. I stared at the photos, bile rising in my throat. The man I loved, the man I trusted with my entire being, was living a double life. The betrayal was so blatant, so callous that it took my breath away. Vivian was everything I wasn't. Young, glamorous, and effortlessly chic. She was the kind of woman who thrived in the spotlight, who knew how to work a room and manipulate people to get what she wanted. I felt a surge of jealousy, a bitter, irrational feeling that I couldn't control. How could he prefer her to me? What did she have that I didn't? But the worst part, Jack wasn't just having an affair. He had been financially supporting Vivian for months, paying for her apartment, her designer wardrobe, her extravagant vacations, all with money from our shared accounts. Sarah showed me the bank statements, the wire transfers, the credit card bills. The evidence was irrefutable. How could he do this to me? How could he be so cruel, so calculating? I wanted to break down, to cry, to scream, but I refused to give him the satisfaction. I wouldn't let him see me weak, vulnerable. I would channel my anger, my pain into something productive. I would make him pay for what he had done. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. Rage coursed through me like fire. I wasn't going to be the silent, heartbroken wife. I was going to make him pay. I started to plot my revenge, carefully considering my options. I knew that I couldn't act rashly, that I needed to be strategic, methodical. I played my part well, pretending not to know, smiling through the pain. I continued to act like everything was normal, going through the motions of our daily life. I even pretended to be happy, laughing at his jokes, engaging in casual conversation. But behind the scenes, I was gathering evidence, consulting a lawyer, securing my finances. I met with a divorce attorney, a formidable woman named Ms. Davis, who specialized in high-profile cases. She advised me to gather as much evidence as possible, to document everything, to prepare for a long and arduous legal battle. I also started to transfer money from our joint accounts into a separate account in my name. I knew that Jack would try to control me financially, to use his wealth to intimidate me. I wouldn't let him. I would protect myself, my future. I also began to research Vivian, to learn everything I could about her. I discovered that she had a history of dating wealthy men, of using her charm and beauty to climb the social ladder. She was a skilled manipulator, a master of deception. I knew that I was up against two formidable opponents, but I was determined to win. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I would fight back with every ounce of strength I possessed. Chapter 10. The Anniversary Confrontation. When I finally confronted Jack, I did it in the most spectacular way possible. At our anniversary party, in front of his family, friends, and business associates. It was a calculated risk, a gamble that could either make or break me. I had planned the party meticulously, choosing the venue, the menu, the guest list. I wanted everything to be perfect, to create the illusion of a happy marriage. right up until the moment I dropped the bomb. As Jack stood beside me, giving a heartfelt speech about our love and commitment, I felt a surge of nausea. His words were hollow, meaningless. He was a liar, a cheat, a fraud. When he finished his speech, he raised his glass for a toast. "To Anna," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "The love of my life." I smiled sweetly, taking a sip of my champagne. "And to you, Jack," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "The man who taught me everything I know about deception." The room went silent. Jack's face paled. He knew. Instantly that I knew. I took a deep breath and launched into my own speech, revealing everything I had discovered. His affair with Vivian, his financial misdeeds, his lies and betrayals. I showed the photos, the bank statements, the receipts. The evidence was undeniable. The guests gasped, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief and horror. Jack tried to interrupt me, to deny the accusations, but I wouldn't let him. I had waited too long for this moment. I wasn't going to be silenced. When I was finished, I dropped my glass on the floor, shattering it into a million pieces. "Happy anniversary, Jack," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I'm filing for divorce." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him standing there in stunned silence, his reputation in tatters. Part 3. The Descent into Darkness. Chapter 11. The Price of Exposure. The aftermath of the anniversary party was chaotic. The media descended upon us like vultures, eager to devour every detail of our sordid affair. My name was splashed across the headlines, my face plastered on television screens. I became a figure of public scrutiny, a subject of both sympathy and scorn. Jack, of course, tried to control the narrative, issuing statements denying the allegations, blaming me for everything. He hired a team of lawyers and PR professionals to try to salvage his reputation, but it was too late. The damage was done. I refused to engage with him, to respond to his attacks. I knew that he was trying to provoke me, to draw me into a public mudslinging match. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I focused on my divorce proceedings, working closely with MS Davis to ensure that I received a fair settlement. I wanted to protect my assets, to secure my financial future. I also tried to shield myself from the media frenzy, retreating to my apartment and avoiding public appearances. I needed time to heal, to process what had happened. But even in the sanctuary of my own home, I couldn't escape the consequences of my actions. Chapter 12. Threats and Shadows. Weeks later, strange things started happening. My car's tires were slashed. Anonymous threats slipped under my door. My bank account had unauthorized attempts to withdraw money. I felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that I was being watched, stalked. I reported the incidents to the police, but they were unable to find any leads. I started to fear for my safety, to question my decision to expose Jack. Had I gone too far? Had I underestimated his power, his ruthlessness? Then, I saw her, Vivian, standing across the street from my apartment, watching me with a cold, calculating gaze. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that she was behind the threats, the vandalism. She was trying to intimidate me, to scare me into backing down. I glared back at her, refusing to show any fear. I wouldn't let her win. I wouldn't be intimidated. But as I watched her walk away, a shiver ran down my spine. I knew that she was capable of anything, that she wouldn't stop until she had destroyed me. Chapter 13. Underestimation. Jack had lost everything. But was he truly done? Or had I underestimated the depths of his vengeance? I started to question my assumptions, to wonder if I had made a mistake in thinking that I had defeated him. I remembered his words, his promises of love and devotion. I also remembered his lies, his deceptions, his betrayals. I realized that I had never truly known him, that I had been blinded by his charm, his wealth, his charisma. I had underestimated his capacity for cruelty, his willingness to do whatever it took to protect his reputation, his power. I had thought that exposing him would be enough, that he would simply fade away. I was wrong. That night, my apartment window shattered, glass raining down as a brick landed on my living room floor. Attached to it was a note. "This isn't over." The message was clear. This was just the beginning. He wasn't going to let me get away with what I had done. He was going to make me pay. Chapter 14, Taking Control. I refused to be a victim. If Jack and Vivian thought they could intimidate me, they had another thing coming. I wouldn't cower. I wouldn't be afraid. I would fight back, harder than ever before. I took matters into my own hands. I hired a security team, changed my accounts, and started digging into Jack's finances. I contacted my lawyer, Ms. Davis, and explained the situation. She advised me to file a restraining order against Jack and Vivian to protect myself from further harassment. I also hired a forensic accountant to examine Jack's financial records to uncover any hidden assets or illegal activities. I was determined to expose his corruption to bring him to justice. And what I found was shocking. Hidden accounts, money laundered through Vivian's company, and transactions that could put them both behind bars. The evidence was overwhelming, a tangled web of deceit and fraud. I realized that Jack wasn't just having an affair. He was a criminal, a con man who had built his empire on lies and stolen money. I had stumbled upon a conspiracy that ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. Chapter 15. The trap is set. I handed everything to the authorities. The arrests came swiftly. Jack and Vivian, once the glamorous power couple, were now nothing more than criminals facing serious charges. The court battle was long and public, with headlines exposing every detail of their betrayal and crimes. The trial was a media circus, with reporters from around the world descending upon the courthouse. Jack and Vivian tried to defend themselves, to deny the charges, but the evidence was too strong. Witnesses testified about Jack's fraudulent activities, revealing the extent of his corruption. Vivian's involvement in the money laundering scheme was also exposed, further implicating her in the crimes. The jury deliberated for days, but in the end, they reached a verdict: guilty. Jack was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and money laundering, and Vivian was convicted as an accomplice. The judge sentenced Jack to prison for a long term, stripping him of his wealth and his reputation. Vivian received a lighter sentence, but her career was ruined, her social standing shattered. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. Justice had been served. They had finally paid the price for their crimes. Chapter 16, Reclaiming My Life. As for me, I walked away stronger. I rebuilt my life free from deceit, wealth gained through pain, and a love that had turned toxic. I divorced Jack, receiving a substantial settlement that allowed me to start over. I sold my apartment, wanting to distance myself from the memories of my marriage. I bought a new home, a small cottage in the countryside, far away from the city and the drama. I focused on my art, pouring my emotions into my paintings. I found solace in the creative process, in the act of transforming my pain into something beautiful. I also started to volunteer at a local charity, helping women who had been victims of domestic violence. I wanted to use my experience to help others, to empower them to break free from abusive relationships. I had lost a lot, but I had also gained something valuable: my freedom, my independence, my sense of self. I had survived the storm, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. As I stood outside my new home, gazing at the horizon, I realized that true freedom isn't just about escaping a bad situation. It's about reclaiming your life. And perhaps in the grand scheme of things, Jack's betrayal was the catalyst I needed to find my true self. Part 4. The Lingering Threat. Chapter 17. The Unanswered Question. But just as I was about to step inside, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. A single text message. "You think this is over?" I gripped my phone tightly, my heart pounding. A chill ran down my spine. The text was anonymous, untraceable, but I knew who it was from. It was either Jack or Vivian or someone acting on their behalf. Had I really won? Or was this just the beginning of another storm? The fear that I had managed to bury began to resurface, a creeping dread that threatened to consume me. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, as a random threat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that I was still in danger. I checked my security system, ensuring that all the doors and windows were locked. I turned on all the lights, trying to dispel the darkness. But even in the brightly lit house, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I knew that I wasn't safe, that Jack and Vivian were still out there, plotting their revenge. Chapter 18. The Serpent's Grasp. The days that followed were filled with anxiety. I jumped at every sound, every shadow. I double-checked the locks on my doors and windows, obsessively scanning my surroundings for any signs of danger. I started to have nightmares, vivid dreams of Jack and Vivian chasing me, threatening me. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, my body trembling. I tried to confide in my friends, but they couldn't understand what I was going through. They told me to relax, to move on with my life. They didn't realize that the danger was real, that Jack and Vivian were still a threat. I contacted the police again, reporting the text message and the continued harassment. They promised to investigate, but they couldn't offer any guarantees. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, a never-ending cycle of fear and paranoia. I didn't know who to trust, where to turn. I was alone, vulnerable, and terrified. Chapter 19. A message from the past. One afternoon, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. My heart pounded as I opened it, fearing what it might contain. Inside, I found a single item, a photograph. It was a picture of my parents taken years ago when they were young and happy. They were standing in front of their art studio, smiling and holding hands. I stared at the photo, tears welling up in my eyes. It was a precious memory, a reminder of the love and happiness that I had lost. But then, I noticed something strange about the photo. There was a small handwritten note on the back. The handwriting was familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. I turned the photo over and read the note. It said, "They knew too much." I froze, my blood running cold. What did that mean? Who knew too much? And what had happened to them? I had always believed that my parents had died in a car accident, a tragic accident that had taken them too soon. But now I started to question everything. Could their deaths have been more than just an accident? Could they have been murdered? And if so, who was responsible? Chapter 20. Unraveling the truth. I decided to investigate my parents' deaths, to uncover the truth about what had really happened. I contacted a private investigator, a different one this time, someone with experience in cold cases. His name was Michael, and he was a seasoned professional, with a keen eye for detail and a relentless determination to find answers. I told him about the photo, the note, and my suspicions about my parents' deaths. Michael agreed to take the case, promising to leave no stone unturned. He started by reviewing the original police reports, interviewing witnesses, and examining the evidence. As he dug deeper, he uncovered some disturbing inconsistencies. The police investigation had been rushed, incomplete. There were several unanswered questions, several loose ends. He also discovered that my father had been investigating Jack's father, Richard Caldwell, at the time of his death. My father, known for his strong moral compass, suspected Richard of shady business dealings. The pieces started to fall into place. Could Richard Caldwell have been involved in my parents' deaths? Could he have silenced them to protect his secrets? Chapter 21. The Confrontation. I confronted Richard Caldwell at his home, the same Newport mansion where I had first sensed the unease in my marriage. The old man was frail, but his eyes held the same calculating glint. "Did you have something to do with my parents' death?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. Richard Caldwell stared at me, his expression unreadable. He didn't deny the accusation, but he didn't admit it either. "Your parents were interfering in things they didn't understand," he said, his voice cold and hard. "They were a threat to my family. You killed them," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "You murdered them." "I did what I had to do," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "To protect my family, my legacy." I lunged at him, my hands outstretched, ready to strike. But his security guards intervened, pulling me away. "Get her out of here," Richard Caldwell said, his voice dismissive, "and make sure she doesn't come back." I was dragged from the house, screaming and cursing at Richard Caldwell. I vowed to avenge my parents' deaths, to bring him to justice. Chapter 22. The Revelation. As I struggled with the guards, I noticed a figure watching from the shadows. It was Serena, Jack's cousin. She stepped forward, her face pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and pity. "I know what happened to your parents," she said, her voice barely audible. "I can help you." I hesitated, unsure whether to trust her. Serena had always been cold and calculating. a woman who looked out for her own interests. But I was desperate. I needed answers. I needed help. What do you know? I asked, my voice strained. Serena led me to a secluded part of the garden, away from the prying eyes of the security guards. She told me a story that chilled me to the bone. Richard Caldwell had indeed ordered the deaths of my parents, hiring a professional hitman to stage the car accident. He had done it to protect his business empire, to silence those who threatened to expose his corruption. Serena had known about it for years, but she had been too afraid to speak out. She had been trapped in her father's web of deceit, complicit in his crimes. But now she was ready to break free. She was tired of living a lie, of protecting a monster. She wanted to help me bring him to justice. Chapter 23 Alliance. Serena provided me with crucial evidence, documents and recordings that proved Richard Caldwell's involvement in my parents' deaths. She also revealed the names of his accomplices, the people who had helped him carry out his crimes. I turned the evidence over to the authorities, and they launched a new investigation into my parents' deaths. Richard Caldwell and his accomplices were arrested, and they were charged with murder and conspiracy. The trial was another media sensation, with the world watching as the Caldwell family's dark secrets were exposed. Richard Caldwell tried to deny the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was found guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. His empire crumbled, his legacy tarnished forever. Serena testified against her father, providing crucial evidence that helped secure his conviction. She was ostracized by her family, but she found solace in knowing that she had done the right thing. Part 5 The Final Game. Chapter 24 The Chessboard. With Richard Caldwell behind bars, I thought that the nightmare was finally over. But I was wrong. The text message still haunted me, a constant reminder that the danger was still lurking. I knew that Jack and Vivian were still out there, plotting their revenge. I received another anonymous package, this time containing a chessboard. The pieces were arranged in a strategic position, a checkmate. I realized that this was a game, a twisted game of cat and mouse. Jack and Vivian were playing me, trying to manipulate me, to control me. I refused to be a pawn in their game. I would play back on my own terms. Chapter 25 The Players. I decided to visit Jack in prison. I wanted to confront him to understand why he was doing this to me. He was a shadow of his former self, his once handsome face gaunt and pale, his eyes devoid of their usual spark. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands shackled. "Why, Jack?" asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sadness. "Why are you doing this to me?" He stared at me, his expression unreadable. "You ruined my life, Anna," he said, his voice hoarse. "You took everything from me. You did it to yourself, Jack," I replied. "You made your own choices. You exposed me," he said. "You betrayed me. You betrayed me first," I retorted. "You lied to me, you cheated on me, you stole from me." "I loved you, Anna," he said, his voice cracking. "I really loved you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done what you did," I said. "You wouldn't have destroyed our marriage, our lives." He hung his head, his shoulders shaking. "I made mistakes," he said. "I regret everything." "It's too late for regrets, Jack," I said. "The damage is done." "What do you want from me, Anna?" he asked, his voice pleading. "What can I do to make this stop?" "I want you to leave me alone," I said. "I want you to let me move on with my life." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with despair. "I can't," he said. "I can't let you go." Chapter 26 The Visitor. Shortly after my visit with Jack, I received a call from the prison warden. Vivian had requested a visitor. Me. I was hesitant. What could she possibly want? Another round of threats? A confession? A final taunt? But curiosity and a morbid sense of obligation compelled me. Vivian was even more changed than Jack. The vibrant, impeccably dressed socialite was gone, replaced by a gaunt, hollow-eyed woman in a drab prison uniform. Her carefully styled hair was now limp and unkempt. The designer clothes were exchanged for prison garb, and the power she once radiated was now replaced with an aura of defeat. "Anna," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you for coming." "What do you want, Vivian?" I asked, my voice cold and guarded. I wanted to apologize, she said, her eyes filled with tears. For everything. For what I did to you, to your marriage. I was taken aback. An apology was the last thing I expected from her. Why now? I asked. Because I finally understand, she said. I finally understand what I lost. What we both lost. She went on to explain how Jack had manipulated her, used her just as he had used me. She had been blinded by his wealth, his power, his charm. She had believed his lies, his promises. I thought I loved him, she said. But it was just an illusion. He never loved me. He only loved himself. She confessed to everything, admitting her role in the affair, the financial crimes, the harassment. She told me everything that Jack had planned, including the details of my parents' alleged accident. He was obsessed with power, with control, she said. He would do anything to get what he wanted. Then she dropped a bombshell. There was another player in this game. Someone who had been pulling the strings all along. Someone even more powerful. More ruthless than Jack or Richard Caldwell. Chapter 27, The Puppet Master. Who is it? I asked, my heart pounding. Who is pulling the strings? Vivian hesitated, her eyes filled with fear. I can't tell you, she said. He'll kill me. You have to tell me, Vivian, I pleaded. I need to know. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. It's Serena, she whispered. Esther here. Stunned. Serena? Jack's cousin? But why? Vivian explained that Serena had always been jealous of Jack, resentful of his wealth and power. She had manipulated him, used him, to achieve her own ambitions. She had orchestrated the affair with Vivian, knowing that it would destroy my marriage. She had encouraged Jack to engage in fraudulent activities, knowing that it would lead to his downfall. She had even been involved in my parents' deaths, providing Richard Caldwell with the information he needed to silence them. She's the mastermind behind everything, Vivian said. She's the one you need to be afraid of. I thanked Vivian for her honesty, promising to protect her if she testified against Serena. As I left the prison, I felt a surge of anger. Serena had played me for a fool, manipulating me, using me to achieve her own twisted goals. I vowed to expose her, to bring her to justice, no matter the cost. Chapter 28, The Trap. I confronted Serena at her home, the Caldwell family estate in Newport. She was surprised to see me, but she didn't seem afraid. I know everything, Serena, I said, my voice cold and hard. I know about your involvement in the affair, the financial crimes, my parents' deaths. Serena smiled, a chilling, sardonic smile. So you finally figured it out? She said. I was wondering how long it would take. Why, Serena? I asked. Why did you do all this? Because I deserve it all, she said. I deserve the wealth, the power, the legacy. Jack was never worthy of it. You were never worthy of him. I am the only one who deserves it. She confessed to everything, admitting her role in the conspiracy. She had manipulated everyone, using their weaknesses, their desires to achieve her own ambitions. She had even planned to kill me, to eliminate the last obstacle in her path. You're insane, I said, my voice trembling with fear. I'm just ambitious, she replied. And I'm about to win. She revealed that she had set a trap for me, luring me to the estate with the intention of killing me. She had hired a team of assassins waiting for her command. Chapter 29, The Hunt. As Serena finished speaking, the lights went out. The house was plunged into darkness. I heard footsteps approaching, the sound of men running towards me. I knew that the assassins were coming. I ran desperately, trying to escape. I knew that my life was in danger, that Serena would stop at nothing to kill me. I navigated the dark corridors of the mansion, dodging the assassins, trying to find a way out. I knew that I couldn't fight them all. I had to find a way to escape. I stumbled upon a hidden passage, a secret tunnel that led out of the house. I didn't hesitate. I ran into the tunnel, hoping to escape the assassins. Chapter 30. The Chase. The tunnel was dark and damp, filled with cobwebs and the smell of mildew. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the assassins behind me, their footsteps echoing in the tunnel. They were gaining on me. I reached the end of the tunnel, emerging into a dense forest. I continued to run, weaving through the trees, trying to lose the assassins. They were relentless, tracking me through the forest, closing in on me. I knew that I couldn't outrun them forever. Chapter 31. The Confrontation. I reached a clearing, a small meadow in the middle of the forest. I turned around, ready to face my pursuers. The assassins emerged from the trees surrounding me. They were armed with guns, knives, and other weapons. I knew that I was outnumbered, outgunned, but I refused to surrender. I would fight to the death. Just as the assassins were about to attack, a figure emerged from the trees. It was Michael, the private investigator who had helped me investigate my parents' deaths. He was armed with a gun, and he opened fire on the assassins, killing several of them. A fierce gunfight ensued, with bullets flying in every direction. I joined the fight, using my knowledge of martial arts to defend myself. Chapter 32. The Reckoning. We fought bravely, but we were still outnumbered. The assassins were relentless, determined to kill us. Just as we were about to be overwhelmed, another figure appeared. It was Serena, her face contorted with rage. She raised her gun, aiming it at me. "I'm going to kill you, Anna," she said, her voice trembling with hatred. Before she could fire, Michael tackled her to the ground. They struggled for the gun, fighting for their lives. In the end, Michael managed to disarm Serena, gaining control of the gun. He pointed it at her, ready to fire. "Don't do it, Michael," I said. "Don't become a murderer." Michael hesitated, his hand trembling. He didn't want to kill Serena, but he knew that she was a threat. Suddenly, Serena lunged at me, grabbing a knife from her pocket. She raised the knife, ready to stab me. Before I could react, Michael fired the gun. The bullet struck Serena in the chest, killing her instantly. She fell to the ground, her eyes staring blankly at the sky. Chapter 33. Justice? The remaining assassins surrendered. The police arrived, arresting them and taking them into custody. Serena's body was taken away, her reign of terror finally over. I stood there, staring at her lifeless body, a mixture of sadness and relief washing over me. I had survived. I had finally defeated my enemies. But at what cost? Michael was arrested for killing Serena, but I testified on his behalf, explaining that he had acted in self-defense. He was eventually acquitted of all charges. The truth about Serena's crimes was exposed to the world, shattering the Caldwell family's reputation forever. I had finally avenged my parents' deaths, bringing their killers to justice. But even with Serena dead, the feeling of unease persisted. I knew that there were still loose ends, unanswered questions. Chapter 34. The Missing Piece. Months later, while sorting through my parents' belongings, I stumbled upon a hidden compartment in their old art desk. Inside I found a letter. It was addressed to me, written by my mother just before her death. In the letter, she revealed a shocking secret. Richard Caldwell was not my biological father. My real father was a powerful and dangerous man, a man who had been involved in organized crime. She had left him years ago, wanting to protect me from his violent world. She had married my adoptive father, hoping to provide me with a safe and loving home. But my biological father had never given up looking for me. He had used Richard Caldwell to track me down, hoping to bring me into his organization. My parents had discovered his plan, and they had tried to stop him. That's why they had been killed. I realized that the text message, the chessboard, the entire game had been orchestrated by my biological father. He was the one who had been pulling the strings all along. He wanted me to join him, to become his heir. He wanted to bring me into his world of crime and violence. Chapter 35. The Offer. Shortly after discovering the letter, I received a visitor at my new home. It was a man I had never seen before, but I knew who he was. He was my biological father. He was tall and imposing, with a stern face and piercing eyes. He exuded an aura of power and danger. "Anna," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "it's time for you to come home." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know you," I said. "You're not my father." "I am your father," he replied, "and I have been waiting a long time to meet you." He explained that he had been watching me for years, admiring my strength, my intelligence, my resilience. He believed that I had the potential to become a powerful leader, to take over his organization, "I want you to join me, Anna," he said. "I want you to become my heir." I refused. I told him that I wanted nothing to do with his world of crime and violence. I wanted to live a normal life, to pursue my art, to help others. He was disappointed, but he didn't seem surprised. He had expected me to resist. "I'm not giving you a choice, Anna," he said. "You are my daughter, and you will do as I say." He threatened me, promising to harm my friends, my family, if I didn't cooperate. He made it clear that he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Chapter 36, The Choice. I was faced with an impossible choice. I could join my biological father, becoming a part of his criminal organization, or I could resist him, risking the lives of everyone I cared about. I spent days agonizing over the decision, weighing the pros and cons. I knew that joining him would mean sacrificing my values, my morals, my soul. But resisting him would mean putting my loved ones in danger. I confided in Michael, telling him everything about my biological father and his offer. He advised me to go to the authorities to seek protection, but I knew that the authorities couldn't protect me from my father. He was too powerful, too influential. He had connections in high places. I realized that I had to make a choice, and I had to make it alone. Chapter 37. The Double Game. I decided to play a double game. I would pretend to cooperate with my biological father, while secretly working to undermine his organization. I agreed to join him, telling him that I was ready to embrace my destiny. He was delighted, welcoming me into his world with open arms. He started to train me, teaching me about the inner workings of his organization, the secrets of his business, the art of manipulation and control. I learned quickly, mastering the skills he taught me. I became a valuable asset to his organization, gaining his trust and respect. But all the while, I was gathering evidence, documenting his crimes, and plotting his downfall. I was determined to expose him, to bring him to justice, even if it meant risking my own life. Chapter 38, The Trust. As I spent more time with my biological father, I started to see a different side of him. He was still a ruthless and dangerous man, but he also had moments of vulnerability, of tenderness. He told me stories about his past, his struggles, his dreams. He revealed the reasons why he had chosen this path, the events that had shaped his life. I started to understand him, to empathize with him. I even started to feel a flicker of affection for him, but I knew that I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. He was still a criminal, a murderer, and he had to be stopped. Chapter 39, The Betrayal. My biological father revealed that he had a plan to expand his organization, to take over a rival gang. He needed my help to execute the plan. He asked me to betray my friends, to provide him with information that would allow him to eliminate them. I refused. I couldn't betray the people who had stood by me, the people who had risked their lives to protect me. My biological father was furious. He accused me of disloyalty, of treachery. He realized that I had been playing him all along. He ordered his men to arrest me, to imprison me. He vowed to make me pay for my betrayal. Chapter 40, The Escape. I managed to escape, fleeing from my biological father's compound. I knew that he would send his men after me. I contacted Michael, asking him to help me. He agreed to meet me at a safe house, a secret location that only he knew about. We gathered our allies, the people we trusted, the people who were willing to fight for us. We prepared for the final battle. Chapter 41, The Final Showdown. My biological father and his men attacked the safe house, surrounding us. A fierce gunfight ensued, with bullets flying in every direction. We fought bravely, defending ourselves against the onslaught. We knew that this was it, the final showdown. Just as we were about to be overwhelmed, the authorities arrived. They had been alerted to our location by an anonymous tip. My biological father and his men were arrested, and they were taken into custody. The battle was over. We had won. Chapter 42, The Aftermath. My biological father was brought to justice, and he was sentenced to life in prison. His criminal organization was dismantled, his reign of terror finally over. I testified against him, revealing everything I knew about his crimes. I helped the authorities to bring down his empire. I was hailed as a hero, a symbol of hope and resilience. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt empty, exhausted, and broken. I had lost so much along the way. I had lost my parents, my friends, my innocence. I had sacrificed my values, my morals, my soul. Chapter 43, A New Beginning? I decided to leave everything behind, to start a new life somewhere else. I sold my home, donated my wealth to charity, and said goodbye to my friends. I traveled the world, searching for a place where I could find peace, where I could heal. I eventually settled in a small village in the mountains, far away from the city and the drama. I bought a small cottage and I started to paint again. I found solace in the creative process, in the act of transforming my pain into something beautiful. I started to volunteer at a local school, teaching art to children. I found joy in helping others, in sharing my passion with them. I started to heal slowly but surely. I started to rebuild my life one brushstroke at a time. Epilogue. The uncertain horizon. Years passed. I lived a quiet and peaceful life in the mountains, surrounded by nature and beauty. I had found a sense of contentment, a sense of purpose. I had learned to forgive myself, to let go of the past. But even in this tranquil setting, I couldn't escape the lingering feeling of unease. I knew that the darkness was still out there, lurking in the shadows. One day, I received a letter. It was from Michael. He wrote that he had discovered new evidence that suggested that Serena had not been acting alone. There was someone else involved in the conspiracy, someone even more powerful, more dangerous than Serena or my biological father. He was closing in on the truth, but he was also in danger. He asked me to be careful, to watch my back. I felt a chill run down my spine. The game was not over. The darkness was still there, waiting for me. I looked out at the horizon, wondering what the future held. I knew that I would never truly be free, that I would always be haunted by the past. But I also knew that I would never give up. I would keep fighting, keep searching, until I had finally uncovered the truth. I had survived so much, overcome so many obstacles. I was strong, I was resilient, and I was determined to protect the people I cared about. The storm may not be over, but I was ready for it. The end for now.